This is episode 141 of the Two Bald Brothers and a Microphone podcast, where we talk about the people, process, and technology to work together better inside enterprises. This episode was recorded on October 26, 2017. In this episode, I talk with Tommy about a book that I'm reading called The Four Disciplines of Execution. The authors are Chris McChesney, Sean Covey, and Jim Hewling. It's from the folks at Franklin Covey, so it's really rich with solid content. In this episode, we will discuss the foreword by Clayton Christensen and set the groundwork for the three sections of the book. Enjoy the episode and thanks for listening. To the Two Bald Brothers and a Microphone podcast. This is your host, Danny Ryan. I have my co-host here with me, Tommy Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You're looking closer to being bald again. That's nice.
I did shave. I shaved this week. I didn't shave this morning, as you can see. A little bit of flurries on the chin, and I it felt good to go bald again. I have to
okay.
Say. It did feel good. It just took a while once you wait a little while. Actually,
that's hard to cut it.
A regular electric razor to it first, and then go with the shave. But let me see. You've got socks. Wise. This is South Carolina socks.
I got these last week. Actually, Linda and Madeline went to Charleston and picked me up some socks.
Nice, very nice. And I got Bo brought me back some. From
yeah, I thought you'd like those.
Yeah, I really do. They're the I guess the UX team had some socks, which was cool, and they had some neat stickers as well, which was kind of cool of them to do that. So
yeah. Thanks, nice. Bo, for bringing them for Danny.
Shout out to Bo. Today we are going to talk about the four disciplines of execution, and this is by our good friends at Franklin Covey. We're big Stephen Covey fans here at Three Will, and so that sort of piqued my interest towards this. This book is applying a lot of those principles that Stephen Covey talks about in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and applies that to your business. And it's called the Four Disciplines of Execution, and the subtitle is Achieving Your Wildly Important Goals. And so today I wanted to talk about just starting to get into the book, and it's broken up into 3 sections, so we like that. I'll talk about a little bit about the foreword, and then talk about section 1. Section 1 is defining what the 4 disciplines of execution are. So it's really it's setting us up for what are they talking about with doing this. So it starts off with one of my favorite authors, Clayton Christensen. He's a guy who wrote Innovator's Dilemma. It says the 4 disciplines of execution offers more than theories for making strategic organizational change. The authors explain not only the what, but the how effective execution is achieved. They share numerous examples of companies that have done just that, not once, but over and over again. This is a book that every leader should read. And then it starts off with a story about Intel, about the old company that I worked for right after college. And it talks about Andy Grove. He was there when I was there as well.
Chemical engineer, wasn't he?
Was he a chemical engineer?
Yeah, I think he was.
Well, I'm just a smart guy. He was a very smart guy. Also liked to paint, I'm sure, like you. I'd read chemical engineering. Who would do that? So what they were talking about was a meeting that he was a part of, and and this is the forward part of it, and so it was a discussion about Andy Grove trying to discuss 2 competitors that were going after the low-end market, and then they knew that Intel needed to respond, and then during a break in the meeting, Grove asked me, how do I do this? How do I respond? And then he said, I readily responded that he needed to set up a different autonomous business unit that had a different overhead structure and its own sales force. And then Andy said, in his typical gruff voice, "You are such a naive academic. I asked you how to do it. You told me what I should do." He swore and said, I know what I need to do, I just don't know how to do it. I felt like I was standing in front of a deity with no place to hide. Grove was right. I was indeed a naive academic. I had just shown him that I didn't know the difference between what and how. So a lot of people talk about the what, and this is Clayton talking about himself and this interaction with Andy Grove. So getting into that was from the Ford. There are two principal things that a leader can influence when it comes to producing results: your strategy or plan and your ability to execute that strategy. Which of these do leaders struggle with more? Is it creating a strategy or executing that strategy? What do you think people respond with?
Executing.
Yeah. If you have an MBA or have taken business classes, what do you study more? Execution or strategy?
Strategy.
Yeah.
Oh, I passed.
You passed.
Awesome.
Right. That's what. Tell him what he's won. So this is good because we want to get into the meat of the issues, and so. And what's neat is this has a bit of state of Georgia stuff in here. It was the real problem with execution. B.J. Walker, commissioner for the Department of Human Services for the U.S. state of Georgia in 2004, that you can see that her 20,000 employees were completely demoralized. The department had burned through 6 commissioners in 5 years, constant media scrutiny due to the number of deaths and accidents involved with children in the state's care, so dealing with the DFACS folks. For months, her employees had operated under constant fear of making a mistake, which only made their poor productivity worse and led to some of the largest backlogs in the country. BJ needed to focus focus her team in a direction and she knew the clock was ticking. In less than 18 months, she and her team had reduced the repeat cases of child maltreatment by 60%. So we'll get into more about what was done there. The common solution to some of these problems, these stories of the state of Georgia and others, the problem isn't problems of a strategy, it's problems with execution. And the common solution that they came to getting to this, I just mentioned the one from the state of Georgia, there were also cases from Eli Lilly and Marriott, is that all leaders struggle with the challenge even if they don't realize it. If you're leading people right now, you are probably trying to get them to do something different. Whether you lead a small work team or a whole company, a family or a factory, no significant result is achieved unless people change their behavior. Yet to be successful, you will need more than just their compliance. You will need their commitment. As every leader knows, getting the commitment of hearts and minds, the kind of commitment that will endure in the midst of the daily grind, is not easy. So he talks about 2 different types of changes, behavioral changes and stroke of the pen changes. So behavioral changes is when, are those that people need to change their behavior in order for that change to occur. Stroke of the pen ones are easy. It's you cancel this service, you do this. It's just something that you can do simply with the stroke of your pen. So they go through the different types of stroke of the pen, types of strategies, like capital investment, expansion of staff, process change is a stroke of the pen, strategic acquisition, media buy, change in product mix. Behavioral changes are improved customer experience, higher quality, faster responsiveness, operational consistency, consultative sales approach, reduced cost overruns. And then sort of getting into people, the common thing that you hear from people is that it's natural for a leader to assume that the people are the problem. After all, they are the ones not doing what we need to have done. But you would be wrong. The people are not the problem. Edwards Demings, one of my someone who I studied even in school, the father of the quality movement, taught that at any time a majority of people have a particular way the majority of the time, the people are not the problem. The problem is inherent in the system. One prime subject suspect behind execution breakdown was the clarity of the objective. People simply don't understand the goal they were supposed to execute. Lack of commitment to the goal was another problem with it. In short, people weren't sure what the goal was, weren't committed to it, didn't know what to do about it specifically, and weren't being held accountable for it. I've talked a bunch. Any thoughts on any of the stuff I've said so far?
Well, and one thing that was coming to mind as you were talking about strategy and execution, I remember back in school, I don't know who I was talking to, but it might have been a professor, and they said success in life is 10% brains and 90% sweat. And I think the sweat part is the part of trying to, follow through and get that path of, I've got an idea and how do I get to that point? Because it's easy to see the final outcome, but to actually get there is a lot of left and right turns, and adapting to the situation and understanding your audience, who you're working with and what their capabilities are and what's the next logical step based on observations of what you've tried and what's working, what's not working. So I think it's easy to see what is the final outcome, where do you want to be. It's just getting there is not always a straight path.
The next thing that's introduced is a concept called the whirlwind. The real enemy of execution is your day job. We call it the whirlwind. It's the massive amount of energy that's necessary just to keep your operation going from a day-to-day basis. And ironically, it's also the thing that makes it so hard to execute anything new. The whirlwind robs you from your focus required to move your team forward. Leaders seldom differentiate between the whirlwind and strategic goals because both are necessary for the survival of the organization. The whirlwind is urgent and acts on you and everyone working for you every minute of the day. The goals you've set for moving forward are important, but when urgency and importance clash, urgency will win every time. Once you become aware of the struggle, you will see it playing out everywhere in any team trying to execute anything new. Consider your own experience. Can you remember an important initiative that launched well and then died? How did that end come? Was it a loud crash or a tremendous explosion, or did it just go down quietly over time, suffocated with the whirlwind? We've asked thousands of leaders this question. We always get the same answer: slow suffocation.
And it makes me think of the different quadrants, of urgent, important, not urgent, but important, and then the other two quadrants. And as we look at quadrant 2, where we want to put our time, which is things that are not urgent but important, those are the things that suffocate. Those are the things that can end up taking a lower priority of our time, and it's the energy we have to put into making sure we're putting enough time into quadrant 2, and then the sand will fill the rest with all those urgent things, and hopefully you're working on important urgent things and not non-important urgent things.
They go on to say, we don't have dragons swooping down and knocking us off our priorities. We have gnats. Every day we have gnats getting in our eyes, and when we look back over the last 6 months, we haven't accomplished any of the things we said we were going to, basically saying.
That's like the sand.
Yeah, the sand filling up the time, absolutely. And that's, and we'll get into the execution of sort of how do you get the big rocks in, I think, is what Covey.
Like the first things first, yeah.
Yep. So the 4 disciplines of execution aren't designed for managing your whirlwind. The 4 disciplines are rules for executing your most critical strategy in the midst of your whirlwind. Okay. So the first discipline, and we're just going to be able to get through the 4. I think I'm just still on the 4 part. We're going to have to hit the part 1 maybe that's coming up. Let's see. Yeah, we're just going to get through.
The 4.
I'm not even to section 1 yet. So
That's fun.
but that's fine. We'll break it apart. And we'll uncover this in layers here. Just a quick introduction to the 4 disciplines, what they are. Discipline 1 is focus on the wildly important. Basically, the more you try to do, the less you actually accomplish. Discipline 1, focus on the wildly important, requires you to go against your basic wiring as a leader and focus on less so that your team can achieve more. When you implement Discipline 1, you start by selecting 1 or at most 2 extremely important goals instead of trying to significantly improve everything at once. We call this a wildly important goal, or WIG for short.
BHAG is another. Mm-hmm.
To make it clear to the team that this is the goal that matters most. Failure to achieve it will make every other accomplishment seem secondary or possibly even inconsequential.
Yeah, I think the hard thing with that, Danny, is picking that one thing and the fear of, did I pick the right thing? And so you're always hedging your bet in a sense, and that hedging the bet can dilute the bet, right?
Yeah. What's nice is we'll get into later, like how do you pick what that thing is? So it's more of the that sounds nice, but then how do you actually get to the point where, and it's interesting. We'll get to that. We'll get to more of that. But you're absolutely right, because what if you pick the wrong one? But that's why and there's some help with what is the right one to pick. But discipline 2, act on the lead measures. This is the discipline of leverage. So there are 2 things I talk about. There's lag measures, which are the tracking measurements of the wildly important goal. They're usually the ones you spend most of your time praying over. So it's revenue, it's profit, it's market share, it's customer satisfaction. Those are all lag measures, meaning that when you receive them, the performance that drove them is already in the past. That's why you're praying. By the time you get to a lag measure, you can't fix it. It's history. Lead measures are quite different in that they are the measures of the most high impact things your team must do to reach the goal. In essence, they measure the new behaviors that will drive success on lag measures. Whether those behaviors are as simple as offering a sample to every customer in the bakery, or as complex as adhering to standards and a jet engine design.
It reminds me of our health metrics, where we do have the pipeline, the closed opportunities, and delivery utilization. That kind of goes from things that are leading indicators that are lagging indicators. And when you get to utilization, that's an indication of, things are working from the pipeline standpoint. You had a right amount of pipeline that leads to the conversion, that leads to utilization.
It'll be interesting to talk about whether...
Which that's very generic. Yeah. It's not talking about here's what we're going to do as an organization, but more of how those measures play out in terms of leading versus lagging indicators.
Yeah, it'll be fun to talk about, like, how do we do this internally at Threewell? Like, is your utilization, is that a lead measure or a lag measure? And talking through some of those types of things as well. And, this is good. This is good, hearty stuff.
It's a lag measure of what you're selling, and then it's a lead measure of what your revenue will be eventually. Because your utilization then turns into what you invoice, and then turns into what you can collect.
So lag measures are ultimately the most important things you are trying to accomplish, but lead measures, true to their name, are what gets you the lag measures. Once you've identified your lead measures, they become the key leverage points for achieving your goal. So part of this is just having that discussion about what are our lag measures, what are our lead measures, and there's there's a discussion about, we have to get into a discussion of what, because that's
Mm-hmm.
you're somewhat guessing at what your lead measures are.
Yeah.
And what are the ones that are important, what are the ones aren't, because I can marketing, from a marketing standpoint, I could come up with 2,000 lead measures, 2,000 different things that I think could produce a lead,
Right.
in a marketing lead. And so there's a discussion about which ones are we measuring, what are the ones that are important.
Right. Are you measuring, and like we do with the number of hits that we have on blog posts or pages on the site, the number of contact us, page hits or executions, the number of webinars that we do,
Yep.
the number of podcasts that we do, and as we know, the hardest thing is it's not just one thing that's a leading indicator for what you're trying to achieve. To have that opportunity to serve a client, it comes from a multiple
Yep.
set of, I think, lead measures that ideally you can tease out the ones that have the biggest impact, and that's the hard part, is understanding which ones you can tease out.
And that's what part of the work that is involved in this book is not. There isn't like the authors admit, there's like, you're dealing with all the same things you dealt with yesterday, but you're trying to spend a little bit of time, instead of just doing everything that you think is a lead measure, really nailing the ones that are, and part of it is a fortuitous feedback cycle, which is, I notice that when I do lead one, that when I do more of this lead measure, I get more of this lag measure, and feeding into that cycle. And if you're not getting that, then I need to do it. It's something to get in the team into thinking about how can I personally make a change in this lag measure. And so the next discipline is discipline 3, which is keeping a compelling scoreboard. People play differently when they're keeping score. If you doubt this, watch any group of teenagers playing basketball and see how the game changes the minute scorekeeping begins. However, the truth of the statement is more clearly revealed by the change in emphasis. People play differently when they're keeping score. It's not about you keeping score for them. So basically, they're saying it's not, they're the ones keeping score. Like, they know what the score is, and so that was interesting that they're pointing this out. Why does this matter? If the scoreboard isn't clear, the game you want people to play will be abandoned in the whirlwind of other activities. And if your team doesn't know whether or not they are winning the game, they are probably on their way to losing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of utilization. That's one thing that we found, that if we measure that, there's different behaviors that come when we make decisions of what people will do, what personally a person will do, knowing that there's a utilization goal, and there's for the company and for the individual. Also, I see with our agile process of having story points and having a goal for what we want to do in the sprint, that there's a sense of, that's our goal, I want to achieve that goal. And so when I'm making decisions that will influence if I achieve it or not, I will pick paths that will help me achieve that goal. There's always something that you're sacrificing, right? So you have to feel that the things that you don't measure are worth sacrificing. And if they're important enough, then maybe you measure those things too, so you can keep it in balance. Because, of course, you can measure one thing and then you get skewed where you can ignore something that maybe is important because you're not measuring that, you're just measuring this. And so utilization, it could be education and growth. Do I want to just bill on projects, or are there some education growth goals I want to set, like certification, and keeping those in tension, so you don't, quote, throw the baby out with the bathwater, in a sense where you're going after one thing and then you ignore something that's very important, that will, say, invest in that capability of having strong utilization or strong sales, because you're making investments that are important. And that's where I think it's tough, is to say, where are those measures, making sure you pick the right measures so you're getting the behaviors that are healthy behaviors. And so if you see something get out of whack because you're measuring one thing and not measuring some other things, then it's deciding what's that counterbalance. What is that other measure that will keep in check some behaviors I don't want to see when we're trying to achieve this other goal?
So what we're getting into, which is a really great conversation, which for us, I believe that utilization is a lag measure, and that there are lead measures. There's a number of things that as individuals, and so you have to talk through what lead measures can I do that will have the most impact on the lag measure of utilization. So you mentioned like if everybody got certified, is that going to really impact how everybody's utilization is? Well, maybe so, maybe not. And that's where the work needs to go into this book, is everybody having a conversation. It's not just you and I either. It's everybody within this company saying, okay, well, I know my utilization could go up if I had, if I was doing this all the time and was measuring this and was trying to do this, and there are 101 things that could be lead measures to that, but you're trying to identify what are the key ones to you, because and part of this, the whole book is you don't have enough time to do everything, and if you don't figure out what those one or two things are that you're doing, they'll just get caught. They'll get lost in the whirlwind, and you won't get to them. And so part of this exercise is trying to identify what those things are as a company.
Right.
And
we know, pipeline is one of those things, but if you think it's something that we're not measuring today, that could be an indicator to utilization as a lag measure, is deal size. So if you sell a bunch of 10K projects, you have, a bunch of 10K projects versus fewer 100K projects, the impact that would have on utilization is a different type of impact. And so if we were measuring deal size and saying we want a goal of a minimum deal size or a certain average deal size.
How do you get to that? Again, that's a lag measure. How do you get to the larger deal size? So and part of the book is the different parts of the organization as well.
So the number of pitches you have for a type of project.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the lag measures number of pitches for a certain type of project, and we're going to do 3 of these pitches this month.
Or lead, you mean lead measure?
That lead measure.
Okay.
So we're going to do 3 of these things that are lead measures, and part of the neat thing about a lead measure is not only is it measurable, but it is something you can do. It is something that is tangible. Like you can't I can't just Tommy, go increase sales. Well, okay, how do we do this, and what are the things? Go increase your utilization. Okay, and so you have the conversation about, you apply the thought towards how do I make a change? What changes could I make to make the biggest impact?
Right. That's good.
Yeah. And some of it's obvious. Some of it's like, oh, I do that, but I only do that once a month, or I do that a couple times a year. And really, if I did that every week, it would have a huge difference. And it's getting into those types of conversations. The 4th one, you'll love this one, which is the equivalent to the sprint review, which is create a cadence of accountability. Discipline 4, and we're on the last one, is where execution really happens. Basically is a rhythm of regular and frequent meetings of any team that owns a wildly important goal. Again, that wildly important goal is a lag measure. It's something that we want the revenue to grow, and it's from X to Y by this date. That's what a wildly important goal. So we're trying to move from here to there by this time, and everybody knows that's what we're trying to do as a team, as an organization. And also you can break it down into, marketing needs, in order for us to get to that, let's say it's a revenue goal, which we often have a revenue goal for the year. What does marketing need to do for their part to get from X to Y by this date in order for the company to meet that goal? And it's the different departments talking about, well, I'm going to do this part, I'm going to do this part, and I'm going to do, because it takes a bunch of different. Everybody doing their own parts.
And I think you're more in that space of the leading indicators. A lot of the marketing activities are, quote, planting those seeds that lead to a lagging measure. So if you look at a number of blog posts in a month, the number of success stories posted to the website, those are things that are leading indicators. And like I said before, the tough thing is which one of those are more important than the others to know, oh, I do more of that. That's moving the needle. That's actually impacting my lagging indicator. So I want to do more of those.
Yeah. I mean, for us, I look at what we're doing, and part of this is what's great about this book is it's talking about, when we get to the end of that first section, it's talking about the annual review, sort of annual plans that we're coming up on doing for the next year, and why those sometimes break down over the year, and how can you institute something where this last part is an accountability process as part of this, so that you're not just picking up, everybody does this, which is we're getting towards the end of the year and we're looking back and saying, well, what did we say we're going to do over that year? I have my marketing spreadsheet that I update monthly and report back. We had this amount of blog posts and these types of things, because those are the things I think are the lead indicator. My wildly important goal is the 3 or more enterprise customers, and by the end of the year, and that's there's things that we're doing already. Mm-hmm. But I do think I have too many. I probably could narrow down what my lead measure. What would I, if I had them? What could I do that would have the most impact on the quality of the leads that we're bringing into 3Will? And there's some things I'm like, yeah, if I did that, I think I could probably improve that. And is it a blog post that we're writing that, or is it something that I'm doing and it's really good? Because I think that in here they're just sort of saying, if you just try to do everything and just you never have the time to get to everything. You just don't. And part of the we'll get to this with the focus piece, is that if you can just narrow it down to the most important things, how much more effective you'll be if you're able to do that. So, all right, we went way long. You need to run to a meeting. I will wrap it up with that. Next one we get together, we'll talk about the sort of define all these 4 disciplines, get into more. There's some great stories about these. Thank you for doing this. I love it. It's great to take some
good material
like this and apply it to 3Will, and I think it's a great time of the year for us to do this. So listen in next time. This looks like it's going to be a 4-part series because we just got through the 4. But thanks everybody for listening, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.